dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and the wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted either with words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Frederick Douglass.
The Abracast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. And violence.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm John Towers, and tonight we're going to be talking. We hear a lot in conspiracy culture. We hear about, some shadowy group or sinister organization pushing agendas in media and in culture. So I thought we could take a moment and stop and take a breath and look at one method that agendas are actually pushed. And we're going to look at current news items and news items from a few years ago, and we're going to examine some of these agendas that are lurching forward incrementally. We are going to track the Overton window as it swings open, or in some cases as a rock gets thrown through it. So, shit, I forgot. Hey, I got a very gentle complaint the other day about the show only coming through one headphone. And I checked a bunch of apps and a bunch of episodes with my headphones, and I can't find any episodes that only pipe through one ear, and not both. So if you are the person that left that iTunes, rating and review, thank you very much for the awesome review. I appreciate it, but reach out to me, please, and let me figure out what the hell's going on with your earphones, please. Or if anybody else out there is having that problem, I'm just trying to identify one or two or three, how many ever episodes I can, to try to fix the problem. So they all go through the same editing process, and they all get mixed into channels. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with your headphones, bro. So yeah, reach out to me, please. I'm very anxious to find out if the problem is on my end and get it fixed. Cause obviously I don't want the audio to be fucked up like that. So, okay, so we're going to get into this. I should do my general disclaimer when I do a show like this, and that is, we are not talking about politics. I know, it's going to sound a lot like we are talking about politics at some point, but what we are actually talking about is how opinions are formed and then moved, or how opinions are shifted. And ultimately, we are talking about the media. And we have a long tradition of talking about media, the media. So, we have a few featured articles this evening. I'll try to call them out as we move through this episode instead of listing them all right here. And one last thing, there's a lot of great info here, and I used portions of a lot of these articles instead of the major. I usually, if I find an article, like I'll do a pretty good once over on it, but I did a lot of picking and choosing for these. So, but there's a lot of great info. So I'm actually throwing a text version of this whole show up on my Subscribe Star. So Subscribe Star is, what is it? Subscribe Star is a free speech Patreon alternative. I know it's a bitch to go over there if you don't have an account, to make an account just to support the show, but we only have one tier. This is a $3 tier, and it gets you everything that's up there. It's like, I think, 14 hours of exclusive audio. You can only find it there. On top of bonus stuff, graphic content, all kinds of stuff is over there. We're starting next month. We're actually going to start doing an extra episode a month up there. So if you're interested, of all that stuff, that's up there. And like I said, also there's a complete text version of this whole episode up there. Subscribe star/Abercast. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, I don't want to beat anyone over the fucking head too much with that stuff, so we'll move on. So if you're playing at home, this is the time where you summon your Vessel of the Art. By the way, the Vessel of the Art is now available at abercast.com. Hit the shop button. You can find it there. The price includes shipping and handling, only in the States, guys, only in the States. So this is where you need to summon your Vessel of the Art, and you need to mix up your formula for your weapon of mass distraction. I have my Jinn Jihad right here, ready to go. And here's to you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate it. I know this episode's like, why is he dropping an episode on Thursday night? It's because I got a lot of shit I got to talk about. Here we go. So I dropped this term already, the Overton window. It's a term for the range. This is right from, full disclosure, this is right from Wikipedia. It's because it's not a very complicated idea. And Wikipedia pretty much sums it up as fast as I've seen it summed up. So the Overton window is a term for the range of ideas tolerated by public discourse, also known as the window of discourse. The term is named after Joseph P. Overton, who stated that an idea's political viability depends mainly on whether it falls within this range rather than on a politician's individual preferences. According to Overton, the window contains the range of policies that a politician can recommend without appearing too extreme to gain or to keep public office. In the current climate of public opinion, Overton describes the spectrum from more free to less free with regards to government intervention, oriented vertically on its axis to avoid the comparison with the left and right political spectrum. As the spectrum moves or expands, the idea at a given location may become more or less politically acceptable. Political commentator Josh Trevino postulated that the degrees of acceptance of public ideas are roughly this. Okay, so remember, stack them in a column. We're going to start at the top, we're going to hit the middle, and then we're going to go to the bottom. So it goes unthinkable. So this would be a thing that's like, it's outside of the realm of possibility. Then right underneath that is radical. And that's just to this side of unthinkable. This is like a lunatic. Acceptable is the next one where, yeah, I mean, sure, it could happen. And then sensible, like, yeah, this not only could it happen, this should happen. And then popular is, instead of a few people saying it should happen, the majority of people going, that should happen. And then once it gets past that, it becomes policy. Okay, so policy is the midpoint. Policy is the zero. Now we're going to start moving into the negative on the other side of that, where it's popular, and then sensible, and then acceptable, and then radical, and then unthinkable. So when you think about the Overton window, think about that laid out, unthinkable to policy. And there's like a little thing that floats above that list. And if someone wants to move the window towards policy, we're going to get into the various methods in which they do this. But so someone will come out and they'll make a radical statement on it. Like, let me think of a hypothetical real fast. It's not in my notes. All right. Well, I'm not going to put myself on the spot too much about it. So let's just pick one that I'm not talking about in the rest of this episode. So let's just talk about like gun control, right? Eventually, sometime, somewhere in the world, some American stood up and went, "We should limit people's access to firearms." And that was an alien thought up to that point. No one had ever thought about that. Up until that point, we had, it's in the Second Amendment, it's in the Constitution, there should be no laws concerning or restricting the ownership of guns, period. But somewhere along the way, somebody stood up and was like, that's fucked up. We need to limit and restrict people's access to ownership of firearms. And everyone was like, what? That's ridiculous. How can you even fucking say that? And so that would be, someone that would be unthinkable moving to radical. Like, that person's a lunatic to have that thought. Really, Janet, who would ever think that they would be able, anyone would want to restrict people's access to ownership of firearms? And then, politics change, the world we live in changes a little bit, and that eventually moves from radical to acceptable, where we have, a larger percentage of people going, we really should do something about limiting people's access to firearms. And then maybe, a war happens, or, a mass shooting occurs, and the window moves from acceptable to sensible, where more and more people are going, we really should do something about these fucking guys with their guns all over the place. And then eventually that moves from, it hasn't done this yet, but eventually it will move from sensible to popular, where most people are like, we really need to do something about, we need to limit, we need to confiscate these guns. We need to do something about these guns. And then once it moves from sensible to popular, the next step is to policy, where there's no political fallout for the politician that stands up there and says, this is it, we're going to fucking do it. We're finally going to get the guns away from these Americans. So like I said, I'm not talking about politics. That's just the first thing that popped into my head. Now, this gun debate that we've been having, it resets every once in a while. It'll move all the way towards policy, and then they'll pass something, and then incremental will back up. First it's background checks, and then it's, magazine capacity. And then some guy goes, really what we need to do is just get rid of all these M16s. And so that'll move up to radical. And then eventually it'll dwindle down to policy. And then they'll fucking do it. They'll ban all M16s or M15s or 14s or AR-14s or assault rifles. Well, I should have just said assault rifles. And then it'll back up, and then it'll be like, we need to get rid of these gun accessories. And then like someone will use one in a mass shooting, or someone will get in trouble with one, and they'll keep pushing the window that way to where they're like, okay, now we can ban this. So the window sort of resets itself, and then it'll be like, we actually need to restrict all guns, or however it's going to wind up working. So that's pretty complicated way. I really added a big extra cyclical sense in, but I think that's apt. I think I did a good job explaining that. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about maybe follow that cyclical resetting too, but that's not actually part of the thing. I guess you just have to multiply. I guess it's compared to how complicated the problem they're trying to, quote, solve, unquote, is. And you could, people that are going to be piqued, you guys are going to be piqued about this or already know about it, or just jump on your Google and look. If you search Overton Window, you're going to find a bunch of people arguing that Trump is pushing the Overton Window. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this isn't a left or a right thing. Like I said, this scenario about the gun confiscation or the gun legislation was literally the first thing that popped in my brain. The Overton Window is an approach to identifying which ideas define the domain of acceptability within a democracy, possible government policies, proponents of policies outside the window seek to convince or persuade the public in order to move and or expand the window. Proponents of current policies or similar ones within the window seek to convince people that policies outside it should be deemed unacceptable. So another way to kind of look at this is creeping normalization. I think that's a sociological term, or maybe a better term would be a driven creeping normalization, or a weaponized creeping normalization. It's the death by 1,000 cuts, or it's like, the story of the frog and the hot water. It's sort of a way to negotiate the free will of the people, or a way to play tug of war with the will of the people. So Overton worked for a think tank. He worked for a libertarian think tank. So let's look at the think tank's role, a political think tank's role. They're sort of like lobbyists. Their organization of like their policy wonks. They come up with a policy they want to see forwarded or pushed, whatever. And they come up with ways to promote these agendas. All right, so we're off Wiki. And to tackle this think tank situation, we're going to jump over to this article from Nathan J. Russell. This is from 2004. It's called An Introduction to the Overton Window of Political Possibilities. To answer the inevitable questions about the role of a think tank, Overton developed an explanation that others have since dubbed the Overton Window of Political Possibilities. Although his theory has roots in complex public choice economics, it boils down quite easily. Imagine, if you will, a yardstick standing on its end. On either end are extreme policy actions for any political issue. Between the end lies gradations of the policy from one extreme to the other. The yardstick represents the full political spectrum for a particular issue. The essence of the Overton Window is that the only portion of this policy spectrum is within the realm of politically possible at any time, regardless of how vigorously a think tank or other groups may campaign. Only policy initiatives within the window of the politically possible will be met with success. Why is this? Politicians are constrained by ideas, even if they have no interest in them personally. What they can accomplish, the legislation they can sponsor and support while still achieving a political success, is framed by a set of ideals that are held by their constituents, by the way people think. Politicians have the flexibility to make up their own minds, but negative consequences, the political consequences, await the elected office holder who strays too far. The politician's success or failure stems from how well they understand and amplify the ideas and policies held by those who elect them. In addition to being dependent on the ideas that form the boundaries of the political climate, politicians are also known to be self-interested and desirous of obtaining the best political result for themselves. Therefore, they will almost always, we're going to talk about some instances where they don't always constrain themselves to talking about actions within the window. There's been a very famous one just very recently of ideas approved of by the electorate. Actions taken outside of this window, while theoretically possible, may be more optimal in terms of a sound policy, are politically unsuccessful. Even if a few legislators are willing to stick their necks out for an action outside the window, most would not risk the disfavor of their constituents. They may seek the good of those who elected them, and even the good of the state or nation as a whole, but in pursuing the course they think is best, most will certainly take into account their political future. This is the heart of the Overton window theory. So if a think tank's research on a principle sound policy suggests a particular idea that lies outside the Overton window, what is to be done? You need to shift the window, since commonly held ideas, attitudes, and presumptions frame what is politically possible. To create the window, a change in the opinions held by politicians and the people in general will shift it. Move the window of what is politically possible to those policies previously impractical can become the next great popular and legislative rage. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the agendas that are, I'm saying the agendas that are being pushed, but they're also the windows that are being nudged, you know. And as I'm going through these, let's think back, I don't know, to the Obama years, or if you're old enough to remember the Bush years or the Clinton years, and see if you can remember which category they might have been on the window in the pretty recent past. All right, so the first section here, I guess it's the second section. I don't know, whatever fucking section it is. The Overton window and the open border. And the name of the article is Immigration and the Overton Window by Garrett Cunningham, September 2018. Oh, God. Okay, here we go. Democrats have moved further left on the issue, seemingly overnight. The Abolish ICE has moved from Twitter hashtag to serious campaign material. Established in 2000, I'm skipping ahead, but like I said, I really edited these just for time and to get my point across. So if you're interested in this whole article, it's called Immigration and the Overton Window by Garrett Cunningham. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to say scooting. I'm not going to say scooting ahead or whatever like I normally do. So here we go. Democrats have moved further left on the issue seemingly overnight. Quote, Abolish ICE, unquote, has moved from a Twitter hashtag to serious campaign material. Established in 2003 during the Bush administration, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE is relatively new law enforcement agency in the Department of Homeland Security. According to Joseph Lehman, a colleague of Overton, politicians do not shift the window themselves, but detect its location and move with it. As I hinted, this is me talking, as I hinted earlier, I think that this is outdated or a limited way to look at this. As we will see in very recent time, there are cases of politicians coming out and saying the radical things themselves to move this window. I think specifically to move or to open the Overton window. Back to the article. In this way, the Overton window operates as a political feedback loop. And then this article goes on to start talking about the media's family separation propaganda, which we've talked about at length. Immigration rhetoric generally would help shift the entire Overton window to the right, thus making the Democrats' policy more moderate. But in reality, the window has just widened. While the Trump administration pushes the immigration window to the right, some Democrats have simultaneously pushed the window to the left. So you think there's a fundamental, I'm guessing, a fundamental misunderstanding that this reporter has of the Overton window. Like I said, it doesn't go left or right. It goes up and down, specifically to not go left and right. On the last week of June, nationwide immigration protests saw thousands brandishing signs to abolish ICE and to condemn the family separation policy. Just a few days prior, the newest face of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who unseated a 10-term incumbent Joseph Crowley to win the Democratic nomination for the New York District 14 House seat. Among her progressive campaign policy is her plan to, you guessed it, abolish ICE. Ocasio-Cortez won her New York district by running to the left of Crowley on many... Crowley. Usually when I say Crowley, I'm not talking about some old aged New York congressperson. On many issues, other progressive Democrats also fared well against their establishment competitors, who were generally more moderate on the issue, like immigration. So it goes on here to point out that instead of moving the window, the Democrats are actually widening it. The progressives are pushing it. They're pushing it forward, and I call them institutionalists. The institutional Democrats are forced to stay in the middle and ultimately dividing these leftists. And this is interesting because this is a macro level, maybe a micro. This is a micro level of what the Democratic primary race is about to do to their base as well. I have a lot to say about that. I might do an episode on what the fuck is going on with the Democrat presidential primary race. Time will tell. But now it's time to do this. Take this moment here between these two sweet guitar licks to remind you guys about subscribestar.com/abercast. Got a lot of good stuff up there, including the text version of this episode, if you're interested. 14 episodes, which are basically 14 hours of exclusive episodes you can find only there. There's Thelema stuff. There's Emerald Tablet to Toth. There's Sex Magic stuff. You can only find it there. And like I said, it's only $3 a month. I think a new tier is going to be coming soon, but I gotta keep a lid on it because it's really fucking sweet. www.abercast.com. You can find social media links there. You can find the mailing list there, where you go and you get a secret link to a secret part of my website where you can get graphic elements, worksheets, notes. We have a Kabbalah episode coming up later this month, so you can go find the Kabbalistic Tree of Life maps, the lightning bolt maps, the different maps of the 3 different Sephiroths, which we're talking about, or the 3 different supernal triangles that we're talking about. So you can find a map to all that stuff there. Check it out. And while you're there, check out some graphic novels and comic books. Also, there's a shop link now for the Vessel of the Art, which is full scale mason jar with the podcast logo on not each side, on 2 sides. Check out the Facebook page. Check out the YouTube page. And don't forget to check out the Sermon of the Wolf. It's a 6-part deep dive into mythology of lycanthropy and werewolfism. You can find that most places. You can find the Abercast. It's not on. I don't know if it's on Spotify. Why don't I know that? But I don't know. It's not on Spotify. Anyhow, whatever. God damn it. I'm so disorganized. bunker. So an interesting way to look at this, the thing that I should have said this before the break, but interesting way to look at this ice thing is 2001, 9/11 happens. 2003, ICE is created to help monitor the border and all that border security, immigration stuff. In under 20 years, we went from zero to abolish ICE in the shadow of 9/11. That's a great way to put it into perspective, I think. So the next one we're going to look at is the Overton Window and Socialism. This is from March 2019. This is a month ago. And this is by a guy named Elad Vaida, Vaida. Let's just get into it. This is the one that I've been kind of hinting about. Examples as of late is the Green New Deal. Alexandria or Ocasio-Cortez likely knew that her plan to retrofit every single building in the United States, end all air travel, and eliminate the bane of cow flatulence was unrealistic and would never become law in the moment. Her fellow Democrats who supported the GND likely knew this as well, which is why Chuck Schumer called Senator Mitch McConnell's decision to bring the GND to a vote a, quote, political stunt. Imagine that. Imagine someone introducing a bill and the opposition going, yeah, we should vote on this right now. And then all the people on the party of the person who promoted the bill were like, no, we don't want to vote on it. No. Senator Ed Markey called it an attempt to sabotage the movement we are building. And that says it all right there, I think. What they all knew was that the political climate was not yet right for the policies outlined in the GND. However, in posting it as an idea, their goal was to shift the frame of the window. So remember the earlier articles, the one from 2004 said politicians don't shift the window, they just track it and attack, like they move when the window is ready. That's what I'm saying. I think that in these days like today, people like Ayman Omar and AOC, to an extent Bernie Sanders maybe, they have these cult of personalities where you could even probably lump Trump in there, where they have the sort of ability to say the radical thing so they can get the window scooching. You know what I mean? They don't have to wait for these think tanks to figure out ways to use the media or whatever to scooch these ideas. We're going to get more into that later. Claiming the world will end in 12 years is meant to normalize a panic. The creeping normalization, a panicky discourse to get people used to the idea that any change will be better than ultimate annihilation. Remember episodes I've mentioned that when you hear the cry, we have to do something, without any definition of what that something is. If you hear a politician say we have to do something, think of the children. Don't be surprised then if 10, 15, 20 years down the road, something like the GND may not only be the law, but may seem tame compared to the new policies being advocated by the left. And finally, let's look at the term socialism itself. 9 years ago, the Huffington Post caused an uproar by claiming that Obama should, quote, just embrace the socialist label, unquote. An American president identify as a socialist, unthinkable, which is the top of our scale of the window. Yet, despite this aversion, the left succeeded in making socialism great again. Socialism is now openly discussed as a viable ideology, congressional dinosaurs like Bernie Sanders and popular demagogues like AOC now proudly embrace the socialist label. Even more moderate, and I use that term very loosely, Democrats like Kamala Harris, who recently claimed that she is not, quote, a democratic socialist, unquote, are now supporting openly socialist policies like ending all private health care. Which leads me quite perfectly into my next section. Let me just think about this for a second, if there's anything I want to add to this. I mean, okay, so let's see. The Cold War was not that long ago. This, what I call the stone cold stunner of the Cold War was Reagan in Berlin yelling, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And that was the stone cold stunner. He heard the glass and it broke his ass. Speaking in 90s wrestling references. That should be great for anyhow. Yeah, so that was the blow that ended the Cold War. Was Ronald Reagan standing in Berlin yelling, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, the wall actually didn't fall for a little bit. They limped on into history. But so let's just say that was 90. I think people will say like the official end of the Cold War was like 92 or 93, maybe 91, something like that. I know when I was in basic training, we all knew what makes the green grass grow was the blood of commies. So, I mean, it was right around that time. You know, what makes the green grass grow? It's the blood of the communist makes the green grass grow. So just think, but sent from, I'll just round it. We'll just say from 1995, the outlier of the end of the Cold War, which it was sooner than that, but like I didn't do any research on this. I'm off page. So 95. So since 95, we went from unthinkable to communists running for president. And literally it was actually 3 years ago because this Bernie Sanders character ran last time around. So there is a good example of the window, you know. I mean, I'm not good at math. I don't know how long it was, but it seems like a pretty short amount of time. Commies make the blood of the communists make the green grass grow to, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bernie Sanders. I'm a communist and I would like to be the president of the United States. And he probably would have got the nomination if Hillary and the DNC hadn't fucked him. Do you guys know that story? I don't know. I don't know if you do. I don't know if I even feel like talking about it. It just certainly doesn't fit into this episode. So Kamala Harris, who recently claimed she's not a democratic socialist, she is now supporting openly socialist policies like ending all private health care. So that creates a beautiful segue to our next section, which is the Overton Window and free healthcare. They call it single-payer healthcare. The name of the article is Bernie Moves the Overton Window on Single Payer. This is by Chris Weigant, I think. 2016, I think. I didn't jot the fucking year down, but I think it's 2016. So this article is a bit older. Single-payer healthcare started squarely in the unthinkable category. For sure it did. Even for most Democrats, it was some wild-eyed lefty idea that would never become reality or even politely discussed among serious people in Washington. So in the 90s, when Hillary was the first lady, Bill gave her a project to do. They called it Hillary Care. So, and that was like the first step of the Overton Window. You know, it went from from, I got to find it went from radical to acceptable. And Bill was like, all right, well, I'm getting my dick sucked. My wife is going to be ruining the healthcare system of the United States of America. And luckily it was a disaster. It didn't come anywhere close to what they were expecting. I'm sure if you Google Hillary Care, you'll find some great stuff. I remember it solely because I lived through the debate. As I pointed out, this is back to the article. As I pointed out earlier this week, it was only 18 months ago that Hillary Clinton dismissed Bernie Sanders' support for single-payer healthcare as a, quote, theoretical debate about some better idea that will never cease or never come to pass, unquote, for Clinton. At the time, the single payer was definitely the unthinkable category. And like I said, she knew because that's what she was going for. That wasn't the first phase. If you look at Hillary Care, I don't think that she went right for single payer, but it was the first step to move to single payer. And Obamacare was the second serious attempt to actually do this. We all know how that went. That wasn't very long ago. Back to the article. That wasn't very long ago. It bears pointing out already. The idea has moved up a notch to radical. By the definition, people, even serious people, are indeed thinking about it and offering up, sorry, I lost my place, proposals for its implementation. More and more for the general public now agrees that the idea of actual acceptable foreshadowing the next step on the Overton scale. Single payer still has a few steps to go, of course, but Bernie's plan may move it along the scale a lot faster than it would have without his Medicare for All bill. Remember, it wasn't that long ago the Democratic Party as a whole considered the ideal unthinkable. Now, though, future movements to acceptable, sensible, and popular seem to be almost within reach. So a lot of these, despite my tone when I read these, a lot of the articles that I've referenced are actually lefty. They're actually lefty websites. They're statist, institutionalist, maybe not institutionalist, statist, progressive websites. This Chris Weigant seems like he's salivating looking for this. Anyhow, already just within 2 years, you can see that we've moved from the acceptable category on our window. Almost, I think every Democrat running has or will have a version or take on this healthcare debacle. The next thing that I want to talk about here, I'm going to do this. The next thing that I have here is this older article. This is from 2014, and it's an article that's talking about this radical idea of universal basic income. It's called the Bipartisan Consensus for Universal Basic Income by David Atkins, 2014. Universal Basic Income, or UBI, which is pretty far still outside the Overton window of mainstream political discourse. For now, he adds, very true, sir, very true. But that is increasingly uniting both progressives and conservatives on the edges. A few number of progressives have been calling for UBI as a response for globalization, mechanization, and flattening of the labor force, and increasing inequality. After all, why roll Sisyphus's stone up the hill of job protection when the jobs themselves are becoming scarce and lower paid for a wide variety of reasons, when instead we could free up human dignity and creativity by not trying survival to having a job, not tying survival into having a job for a corporate overlord in the first place. So I need to point out that this was written in the dystopian Obama years when our president was wandering around West Virginia talking about your jobs aren't coming back, the decline of America and all this. So fast forward 5 years to a booming economy, the lowest unemployment numbers of, for all intents and purposes, the history of the fucking world. And we have 2020 presidential hopefuls, serious contenders, they say, out there making cases for UBI and people talking about them and thinking about them. Serious people that, listen, I like Joe Rogan. I like to listen to his podcast, but seriously, as soon as they start talking about politics, I zone out because he just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it. And you have someone that's influential like Joe Rogan, very influential like Joe Rogan, out there going like, I'd pay a couple more bucks just to have people have basic universal income. And the mind bender about this is this article is not wrong. This window is being moved from both sides. There are conservatives that are pushing for universal basic income. Their reason for it, so the left's reason for it, seems to be, globalization and mechanization and inequality. They're pushing for it because if they give it to the people, then they are winning Democratic votes forever. This reminds me of a quote from LBJ that I won't repeat here when he's talking about the Great Society or whatever his bullshit was called. Go look it up if you're interested. It's a shocking quote. Anyhow, the conservatives are looking at it from, I guess, a little bit better of a position where they're saying if we give them universal basic income, we could get everybody off of welfare. We can get everybody off of food stamps. We can get everybody off of COBRA, whatever bullshit, taxpayer funded medical things that they're on. But they're losing. One of the first lessons of our country is when you give people stuff, they stop aspiring. It leeches them of their creative, innovative spirit. And I know this is not the same podcast, but if you would like to go and listen to my hour, I think it was over an hour long spiel on the Pilgrims, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. It's over in the American Sermon. It's like one of the last episodes, I think. Anyhow, enough rambling. I'm getting back to this. Earlier in the episode, one of these articles of the Overton Window and the immigration article, say that politicians don't move the window traditionally, besides AOC and stuff, but the politicians don't get there and say their radical things, forcing the window up and down traditionally. They pinpoint the window, judge to see how far they can push it. So we are left with the question, how do the think tanks move this window? And this is from Real Clear Politics, which, according to the internet, is a pretty center website. The article is huge, and I am not going to read this whole fucking thing, but I do have some bits here that I think explain my thing. So when I was getting this episode together, I had a hard time kind of linking the top and the bottom. So this was brilliant on my part. No. So this firm, the Democratic Integrity Project. So I'm not sure if they classify themselves as a think tank. They call themselves an organization. I've seen them called a media organization. Anyhow, we'll just say they have an agenda that they are pushing to move the Overton window. This article is called "The Dossier-Tied Firm Pitches Reports Daily on Collusion" by Paul Sperry. All right, we're wrapping this up. Just stay with me for like another couple minutes. The Democratic, this is so funny. Read Ayn Rand. She explains why, well, I don't know if she explains why, but she talks about these bureaucrats that name things and they name them the exact opposite of what they actually do. Just think of like the Ministry of Love. And the Ministry of Truth is the propaganda arm in 1984. This is the Democratic Integrity Project. All right, listen to this. It's led by Daniel J. Jones, a former FBI investigator, a Clinton administration volunteer, and a top staffer to California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein. Now, Dianne Feinstein is interesting. She's been in the Senate forever. She's ancient. And she had a Chinese spy working as like her, it was like her chauffeur or something for like 10 or 15 years. This guy was an embedded Chinese spy. And he was working for her for years. So, you know, when the FBI figured out what was going on, you know what they did? They said, hey, Diane, you have a spy working for you. And she fired them. So when you think about this whole Russian collusion business, where the reason they were trying to investigate Trump is because they thought he had a spy. But their answer wasn't to let him know that he had a spy. He didn't have a spy, but that was the suggestion. Their answer instead was to go, we need to have a spy on the inside too. And that's part of how they got the FISA warrants to start, literally start spying on a guy who was running for president. All right. So like I said, this is 11 page, like it is like 11 normal pages long if you try to fucking print it. And I'm not reading through all of this stuff. So, this guy was a top staffer in Dianne Feinstein's office or whatever, and employs key opposition research figures behind the salacious and unverified dossier. This dossier was also used to obtain FISA warrants, and it was salacious and unverified. And they knew it was salacious and unverified when they used it to get FISA warrants. I'm trying not to get into this. I've been following it very closely, but I'm trying not to get into it because this isn't about collusion. This is about the media. Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson and ex-British intelligence officer Christopher Steele. Its financial backers include the actor/director Rob Meathead Reiner and billionaire activist James Bond villain Soros. The project's work has been largely shrouded in mystery, but a months-long examination by Real Clear Investigations, RCI later, drawn from documents and more than a dozen interviews, found that the organization is running an elaborate media influence operation that includes driving and shaping daily coverage of the Russian collusion theory, as well as pushing stories about Trump in national media in an attempt to tie the president and his associates to the Kremlin. 5 days a week, TDIP, the Democratic Integrity Project, emails a newsletter to influential Democrats and prominent Beltway journalists under the heading TDIP Research, which summarizes the latest, quote, collusion news, unquote, and offers, quote, points of interest, unquote, to inspire fresh stories regarding President Trump's alleged ties to Moscow. Now, recipients of TDIP reports include staffers at where? New York Times. And where? The Washington Post. And investigative reporters at where? BuzzFeed, which broke the Golden Shower news. BuzzFeed literally broke the Golden Shower news. ProPublica, McClatchy, as well as news producers at where? CNN. Where? MSNBC. According to sources familiar with the project's email distribution list, Democratic aides on Capitol Hill also subscribe to the newsletter. The briefings typically run several pages and include a, quote, executive summary, unquote, and links to documents and congressional testimony, letters and memos, as well as news articles and videos. So let's just back up for a second. 5 days a week. 5 days a week just pulsing out this stuff. And the news and these journalists and these congressional staffers and fucking BuzzFeed, they just turned around and used it as sort of copy and paste. So this is what happened. It's a press release. This is what happens. The press release, if you write a good press release, what you're doing is you're actually writing the article for somebody. You write the article for somebody and you send it out to them. You send it out into the world to your giant mailing list, or your press release mailing list. And what they do is they take it and they copy and paste parts of it, and then they type for a little while and they build a thing around it. So before on the show, especially when I talked about Operation Mockingbird, I would play these videos of these news reporters saying the exact same thing, even though they're not in the same market. They're not even in the same fucking state. They're not even in the same fucking part of the country. And they're saying the things word for word. And Operation Mockingbird business, right? So, you know, like, you think about it and like, is this what's happening? Is this what's happening? Someone's writing the news and sending it to them, and they just turn around and read it. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. T-dip. I'm not saying they're responsible for all of it, but like all this Russian collusion business, right? Like I said, this isn't about politics, it's about media. It's about the battle for your opinion. 5 days a week, these fucking people would just get hammered with this. Imagine how many stories they were responsible for. Despite the 2.5 year to 3 year investigation reports stating unequivocally there was absolutely no evidence of Russian collusion. However, according to Reuters, despite report findings, almost half of America thinks Trump colluded with Russia. This is a Reuters Ipsos poll from Chris Kahn, March 26th, just a month ago. Nearly half of all Americans still believe President Trump worked with Russia to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, according to a new Reuters Ipsos poll conducted after a special counsel, Robert Mueller, cleared Trump of that allegation. I wonder why. It seems like someone was really trying to move the window. Anyhow, thank you guys for listening. I'm sorry. I had a lot to get off my chest this evening. I think we're running a little bit late. Hey, remember to hit up subscribestar.com/Abercast. You can find 14 exclusive episodes there. You can also find the text version of this episode there. One tier, $3. That's it. You'll never fucking miss it. www.abercast.com. Social media links, mailing list links where you can get a secret link to worksheets, notes. And I'd like to point out that we do have a Kabbalah episode coming up this month, and you can go and find all of my notes and scribblings regarding the Kabbalistic tree of life, the three triangles of the tree of life, the lightning bolt path through the different Sephiroths. You can find all kinds of great shit over there. Not to mention tarot card nonsense, all kinds of good stuff. While you're there, remember to check out some books, some comic books, and some graphic novels. Also, hit the shop link. You can pick up a Vessel of the Art The price, I'm not sure how it works. The price there does definitely include shipping. I made sure it includes shipping, but only in the States, fellas, only in the States. Get your own vessel of the art so you can mix up your own formula for mass distraction. Here. Check out the Facebook page. Hey, meanwhile, I'm thinking about getting the fuck off the Facebook page. I'm thinking about fighting the analog, dude. But I'm still there, begrudgingly. If you guys are on Minds.com, please find me, Abercast. Please find me. I'm looking for folks to link up with on Minds. I actually want to make the move. Similar to shit canning Patreon and moving over to Subscribestar, I want to do the same thing. I want to shit can Facebook and move over to Minds.com. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube. I got the whole YouTube channel over there. I get it's very interesting sometimes. And don't forget the Sermon of the Wolf. We do a 6-part deep dive into werewolfism and lycanthropy. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Ever since I was a kid, I like the Wolfman. So there you go. Thank you guys for listening. And I'm John Towers, and I don't know, over. I don't really have a sign off thing. I should just say over and out, or say, hi, I'm John Towers. Thanks for listening. Fuck off. Maybe that's a good one. Or, I don't know. Maybe I'll work on it. Anyhow, I hope that you guys, I don't know, maybe, have you ever heard of the Overton Window? Have you heard of the Overton Window? What do you think about it? It's devious. It's complex. It's shitty.